So yeah, common consent. Um, I guess I would just start by pointing out that humans are rational animals. Like we're reasonable. I think, contrary to popular opinion, we're not all totally stupid. Like if you compare us to like other creatures, it's obvious that like our rationality is something that sets us apart. And I take it that theists and atheists can agree on this. Like theists will think that it's because we have the image of God, and like atheists will have some other like evolutionary explanation for it or something. But I take it that like our rationality, it gave us an advantage, adaptively. Like it has something to do with why human beings are at the top of the food chain. Like it has something to do with why we're different and why we can speak like we're speaking right now. Like I think our rationality has something to do with our technology and our evolutionary success. So I think that if virtually all of the rational animals come to the same conclusion, that should affect your judgment. um, like if we all roughly agree on something, then that's not evidentially neutral. And like I said, with the complementarity point, you can think, what if belief in God was basically like belief in flat Earth? It was like few and far between. Like nobody took it seriously. It was just this weird thing that you heard about sometimes. Would we be in the same exact situation? Would that be like totally irrelevant? It's like, no, it wouldn't be irrelevant. Um, so yeah, if almost all of the rational animals come to a similar conclusion, um, that is evidence favoring the truth of that proposition. I mean, like, hopefully I don't have to specify it's not like absolute proof for it, or like, yeah, everyone can be wrong. There are examples of us being wrong collectively. But the thing is, we're right more often than we're not. Like, if you look at the set of beliefs that practically everyone agrees on, those are mostly true. And they're not just about like trivial things. Some of them are like metaphysical conclusions, like the external world exists and other minds exist. Those are like metaphysical conclusions. Um, but they're mostly trivial things, like um, tables exist, the sky is blue, putting your hand in a fire hurts, 6 is more than 2, 2 is less than 16. Like there are just all these things that pretty much everyone agrees on. But I think we agree on it because we're rational, and we can like see the truth in these things, either through rational intuition or through perception or whatever. So the thing that everyone agrees on here is that something godlike exists. They don't agree that the monotheistic God exists, like the omni God or something. They don't agree that like, Christianity is true. They just agree that there's some kind of divine reality. There's something godlike that exists. There's widespread agreement here, like throughout all of recorded human history, the vast majority of human beings agree that there is something godlike that exists. So my only claim really is that that matters evidentially. That theism does get like some kind of probability boost from that. Yeah, and to me, it seems like I have less and less patience for people who don't see this. Like, it just seems like totally obvious to me. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it like just should start from a place of like, okay, you're a single person, and then there's a whole bunch of other people, and you came to most of your beliefs through the use of a bunch of other people, and they've sort of been helping to form your belief systems and things like that. And whereas you might individually get something wrong, somebody else can correct you on that sort of matter. And there's a sort of like, I don't know, understanding of epistemology as part of like a group cooperative consideration or a process that might take place. And so when you think about the fact that, yeah, like most of the people have held to some sort of theistic belief of some sort, and there's kind of a minority, both historically speaking and geographically speaking, that are actually like, no, that's actually stupid. I think I don't know, it comes, at least to me, with a significant sort of cost to sort of bear, to say that, yeah, most of the people that have ever existed have been real idiots. And like, I don't know, maybe I feel like that seems like a really epistemically sort of like conceited position to sort of take. And I don't know if I'm that like confident of my own particularly geographically sort of like determined space and time in order to like make such a wide swath judgment over like most of history and most people over everywhere. Seems like, I don't know, kind of a wild sort of position to state.
Yeah, like for me, it is partly about humility. Like, okay, like 9 out of 10 people in a room see something and you don't. And it's like, hey, maybe you're just not seeing it. Like, maybe they see something that you don't see. That doesn't mean you should change your mind. Like, you should stick to your guns. You should like have your convictions. But it should give you a little bit of humility when you realize that practically everybody, like, there's this, because the specific feature that I'm keying in on is the persistence and the prevalence of this belief that something godlike exists throughout all of recorded human history. So like the vast overwhelming majority of rational animals like have believed that something godlike exists for all of human history. It's an extremely persistent and prevalent belief, and practically everything that answers to that description, with that degree of persistence and prevalence, virtually all those beliefs are true. So like, anyway, I think that it does get a
Emerson,
probability boost. That's the only claim.
people, come on, people used to believe the Earth was flat. The argument's been debunked now.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, do you have a degree in quantum physics, Emerson? You've been
Wait.
debunked, Emerson. People believe in Bigfoot, Emerson. You're debunked.
Damn.
Shoot, man, I just found out, while you were speaking, someone just replied to my tweet and they said, have you even heard of the argument ad populum fallacy? So those are two decisive,
Yeah,
two decisive
you're committing
defeaters.
a fallacy. I don't let people on who use fallacy.
Right. People used to believe things that were wrong sometimes, and fallacy. So, yeah. All right, never mind. Forget everything I just said, actually.
God's fake.
I mean, like my thoughts on like the argument from Comic Guts, then it's like, I mean, at one time that was like the only argument I knew, like for God. It was like, oh, well, like most people believe in God. Like that was like the only, that's like the like first thing like most people like who don't like study philosophy and stuff think is like the main reason to believe in God, maybe. But it's like, it's obviously not like up there as like the best argument, but like it is kind of an interesting starting point. Like, okay, well, like a lot of people do believe this, and like, we generally trust what like most majority of people believe, but at the same time, like you could see why there are, I mean, obviously I don't have to tell you this, like that there are psychological, like motivating, pragmatic reasons to like believe it because you want it to be true, and that does factor in when it's something like, like the shape of the Earth. While it has some pragmatic reasons for some people, like most people, it's probably going to be like, well, they'll just look at the way it is. So like, I mean, I guess what I'm saying is, as we know, it's a different kind of question, but I agree, like all things being equal, like the majority view, like of rational people, we do give some weight to. So,
and I guess the only response to this that I find really like promising is, I can't remember the exact name of the argument, but I interviewed the co-host of Naturalism Next about, like the evolutionary origins of belief in God. And like, that does seem like that actually has potential, if you just develop some kind of error theory for like, okay, yes, everybody believes in something godlike, but, here's the story about why that is the case. Like that seems to be like the most promising reply. Things like, it's like a combination of a few different hypotheses, like hyperactive agency detection is one that everyone has heard of. And then there's just a few other things that he kind of ties together. And like, yeah, that is like, I think the most plausible response, because I mean, even just like setting aside like the like dialectical context of like, trying to come up with the best like cumulative case or whatever, it's like, as an atheist, aren't you curious why everybody believes in this thing that doesn't exist? So yeah, it just seems like a matter of curiosity, if nothing else. But yeah, that seems like it's the best response to the common consent argument, but every other response is bad.
Yeah, I was just about to say that for the, I don't know, I do think that like, even when there is a sort of widespread agreement on some sort of position, if you can sort of pinpoint how all the people's like coming to believe that particular thing had originated through some sort of faulty method of some sort. So like, suppose that everyone in an entire city believed that aliens have invaded or something like that. But if you came to find out like, no, everyone's belief that aliens had invaded had come from this sort of like radio broadcast of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds, which is like a fictional story. If I were to discover that, I think that would like completely undermine whatever weight that there might have been prior to that of like, oh wow, aliens have actually invaded. And so similarly, if the atheist is able to like provide a reasonable account as to how everyone or most everyone came to some sort of belief in God through some sort of like naturalistic evolutionary story that could be told, then yeah, I think that could similarly work to, I guess, sort of discredit this argument. Although I will say that like sometimes these sorts of like rebuttals, I don't know, I feel like they go a little bit too far, because if we say that, oh, some faculty that we have evolved provided some sort of advantageous use in our evolutionary past, therefore the faculty is unreliable. Like that seems like an awful argument, because like you could say the same thing about like, okay, our mathematical faculties, those were things that we've probably evolved due to some sort of advantage that they gave to us over our sort of evolutionary history. But like, do we want to say that therefore like math is fake just because like we happen to evolve a faculty that helped us?
It debunks, man.
I guess.
Okay, I just want to go to like, so Joe Blow asked, perhaps there's some probability boost, but how much? Is it even close to material, especially consider the burdens of the underlying theories? So what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason it's not a more widely discussed, like, argument. Like I said, the theme is kind of like less discussed arguments, and it's like, yeah, it's not like a massive probability boost. It's just a probability boost. Like the probability boost would go to atheism if the data were reversed. Like if most people didn't believe in God. I mean, like I said, for me, it mostly causes like some degree of humility. Where it's like, you are saying that basically everyone is wrong. And that just doesn't strike me as something that should be taken lightly, I guess. So it more affects like my disposition more than anything, But yeah, I wouldn't say it's like this massive probability boost. Like John Steingard.
You mid-atheists are arrogant.
Well,
let me clip this out from my channel. Go ahead.
I think I did say something like that in the devil's advocate debate, where I said like, humility is not the word that springs to mind when I interact with like atheists on the internet. But yeah, it's like when they're saying like, oh, it's like Santa Claus, it's like the flying spaghetti monster. It's like, well, here's a disanalogy. Nobody believes in there's no like functioning adult who believes in Santa Claus. It doesn't have the same features as theism, or belief in something godlike. So it's just a really obvious disanalogy, and you should treat it differently for that reason.
I was gonna say, it seems like this sort of argument could actually be stronger, not applied to theism, but maybe like towards the spiritual world of like just supernatural entities of any sort, or even like demons in particular. Because like, I would think that like probably even more prevalent than like theistic belief is probably some sort of demonic belief in like people being possessed and things like that. And so I don't know if you would take that as just sort of like, yes, that's another conclusion that I can drive, or is this like giving you a sort of reason like, well, maybe the consent argument isn't very good?
No, I mean,
some people will use it as an argument ad absurdum.
No, that's silly. I mean, it's like, there are like historically more people have believed in like ancestor spirits, like, belief in the afterlife kind of comes out on top with this. Like if you're talking about this general category, like more so than ancestor spirits, more so than like, many gods or like some kind of divine reality. Like an afterlife is like the overwhelming, like that it kind of comes out the best if you're making this sort of argument, which doesn't entail theism. You could obviously have an afterlife, but no God. Yeah, but no, yeah, it's sort of like with phenomenal conservatism, where some people start to realize that this is like kind of permissive, and it's like, yep, like yes, it is. But yeah, it's also like you just shouldn't confuse like, probability boost with something that's like of critical significance. Like, look, like evidential support happens all over the place. Like you have to admit when it happens, or else you're not really arguing in good faith. And like, all I'm trying to say is that, widespread theistic belief is evidence for theism. It's not conclusive evidence. It's not like a dramatic probability boost, such as like atheism is irrational or something. But yeah, I mean, evidential support happens all over the place, but this is actually a good argument for God. And I think it's weird that theists don't like it, because it is a good argument. And the only response really is this, like, I mean, the only non-idiotic response is this kind of evolutionary debunking argument. And, that's a complicated issue. Like you were saying, just because we can explain the evolutionary origins of something, that doesn't mean that like it's not tracking the truth, So even if you could explain, it's like maybe that's how God is, reaching out to us. I mean, you can always say that, oh, that's just how God chose to do it or whatever. And then you could also question whether or not that sort of theory, like that cluster of theories, actually does explain theistic belief. Like that's not a given. Yeah. Anyway, there's a lot of interesting ground there, but I don't see why it should be as neglected as it is.
I guess from my perspective, if I was on the other side, like I would respond like saying sort of like widespread pragmatism might explain it. Like a lot of people are doing like Pascal's wager type reasoning, like that, even if they're not really that informed about philosophy, but they like the idea of God existing, it's just gonna make sense that like those people would conclude God exists, even if they're not necessarily even justified. And like, I don't think that undermines the argument having some weight, but I guess that would be maybe the best response to my mind. But I guess it still does hint that there is. Then you could say, well, is this then piggybacking on like, yeah, there are some like at least okay natural theology arguments, and then people tend to select those over the arguments against God, and like I don't know if it's a good response, but that's just kind of like.